Imagine standing across from a man who seems to have it all together. His career polished, his schedule precise, his relationships seemingly intact. He smiles at the right times, says the right things, lives by all the unspoken rules of strength. And yet, there's a silence inside him, a space untouched. Something about him feels distant, like a locked room in a beautiful house. He doesn't know it, but that room holds his soul. Until one day, without warning, a woman walks in, not with force, not with seduction, but simply with presence. Something in her gaze, her way of being, gently brushes against that closed door. And for the first time, something ancient in him stirs. Not desire, not logic, but something deeper, something symbolic. Carl Jung once said, "The soul does not love the obvious, it loves the symbolic." And that's where our story begins. This isn't about fairy tales or romantic cliches. This is about truth, about how a woman, by simply embodying her essence, can awaken the inner world of a man who has lived too long in denial of his depth. What she touches isn't just his heart. It's his shadow, the part of him that holds all he suppressed, abandoned, or feared. His longing to be held, not for his success, but for his vulnerability. His need to surrender without shame. His forgotten hunger to be seen, truly seen, beyond all roles and masks. And here's the paradox. When she awakens this, he doesn't run toward her. He often pulls away. He rationalizes. He retreats into the familiar. Why? Because he was never taught how to feel this deeply. The masculine code he inherited glorifies control, not surrender, victory, not vulnerability. But she has already touched something sacred in him, his anima. She has not offered him herself. She has offered him a mirror. If you are a woman who has ever left someone speechless without saying much, or a man who felt shaken by a connection he couldn't explain, then you are not alone. What happened between you was not just chemistry. It was a confrontation between soul and structure. What if I told you that the moment you couldn't stop thinking about, the one you tried to label or forget, was actually the beginning of your individuation? Jung called this the process of becoming whole, when the self stops performing and starts integrating. That woman or that feeling wasn't meant to complete you. It was meant to reflect you. Her presence symbolized a part of yourself you never dared to meet. The version of you that is more real, more tender, more human. And when she left, or when you pushed her away, you didn't just lose a person. You lost an opportunity, not to have her, but to become yourself. In this video, we journey into that space, the invisible threshold where romantic connection becomes psychological awakening. Well, explore why men often fall deeply in love with the symbolic, not the visible. What the anima represents in Jungian psychology. Why the perfect woman may not be who you think she is. How love can activate our shadows, and how running from it delays our transformation. And most importantly, how to begin reclaiming the parts of yourself she once reflected. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt like your soul was shaken, not by what was said, but by what was seen, then stay with us. This isn't just a video. It's a mirror. Let it show you what you've been afraid to feel. And when you're ready, share your story in the comments. You may be surprised how many others are walking the same inner path. Subscribe to join this journey of psychological depth and soulful healing. This channel is not here to teach you how to find love, but how to understand it, how to see it not as possession, but as transformation. Because real love doesn't save you. It shows you how to save yourself. There is a moment so subtle, so quiet, that most people overlook it. A man walks away from a conversation, sits alone in his car, and instead of turning on the radio, he just pauses. He doesn't know why. But something inside him has shifted. He's thinking about her not because of what she said or what she wore, but because in her presence, something inside him felt exposed, vulnerable, seen. This is not the kind of attraction that erupts like fire. It is the quiet kind, the kind that unsettles something deeper, the kind that reaches into the very structure of a man's psyche and touches what he didn't even know was asleep. Most men are not taught to notice these moments. Society trains them to value logic, strength, performance, to repress softness, to avoid emotion. From an early age, many are told, don't cry, man up, don't be weak. And so they build a shell, layer by layer, until their soul becomes a room they themselves cannot enter. But when a woman shows up authentic, calm, and self-contained, she often becomes a symbol, not just a person. She mirrors something his unconscious has longed for the freedom to be whole, not performative, not strong, just real. Carl Jung called this inner feminine image within every man the anima. She is not a fantasy lover or a perfect partner. She is the soul's call for emotional integration. And when a real woman embodies aspects of his anima without even realizing it, he doesn't just see her. He feels her on a mythic level. She represents more than herself. She becomes a portal. That's when the trouble begins. The masculine psyche, unprepared for such depth, begins to resist. He may feel overwhelmed, even panicked. Not because he doesn't care, but because something sacred has been triggered his shadow. The part of him that holds his repressed fears, wounds, and yearnings. All the pieces he had to hide just to survive in a world that demanded stoicism. This encounter with the anima often activates the shadow, and that inner collision can be terrifying. Suddenly, he is not just falling in love, he is being confronted. He is confronted with the loneliness he never admitted, the softness he never showed, the childhood longing for affection that he buried under ambition and control. And this awakening doesn't come with instructions. So he pulls back. He distances himself, not because she did anything wrong, but because her presence exposed the very parts of himself he's been running from. To love her would mean to face himself, and many men are not ready for that. They say it's not the woman they're afraid of, it's what she represents. Because she doesn't just offer connection, she symbolizes inner transformation. Her energy speaks a language his logic cannot understand, a silent frequency that says, I see you not your mask, but your soul. And here lies the paradox. What he most needs is what he most fears. If he has not yet begun the process of individuation, Jung's term for becoming a whole, integrated self, he will struggle. He may try to control the feeling, rationalize it, dismiss her, or replace her, but nothing quite fits, because it wasn't her body or voice that moved him. It was what she reflected, a part of himself he's never dared to explore. This is not romantic fantasy. This is psychological initiation, and it's uncomfortable. Because the anima does not come into his life to give him comfort. She comes to awaken him, to unsettle the stagnant waters, to bring light into the shadow. Her role is not to be his, but to mirror him. She may not even know what she triggered. Often the women who awaken this depth in men are simply being themselves. They are not seducing, not performing. They are grounded, sovereign, and authentic, and that is precisely what makes them so magnetic to the male unconscious. Their presence is disruptive in the most beautiful way, and for the man this disruption, if he allows, it becomes the beginning of something irreversible, transformation. But first comes confusion, resistance, silence. He may try to forget her, move on, bury the feeling under logic and distraction. Yet late at night, in moments of stillness, her presence lingers not as fantasy, but as echo, not because he loved her, but because she revealed him. And that is something the mind cannot unsee. If he dares to reflect, he might begin to ask, what did I feel in her presence that I can't find anywhere else? Why did she disarm me without even trying? These questions are the entryway to the soul. And whether or not he ever tells her whether or not they meet again, what matters is this: she has already served her purpose, not as a lover, but as a mirror. She showed him the door. Now the question is, will he walk through it? When a man walks away from a woman who unknowingly awakened his soul, it rarely looks dramatic. There's no explosion, no heated argument. Often it happens quietly, a slow retreat cloaked in confusion. He tells himself, it wasn't that serious, or it just wasn't the right time, and life goes on. But not really, because what has been stirred is not the surface, it's the unconscious. And the unconscious doesn't forget. On the outside, he might appear unchanged. He may dive into work, find distractions, even start new relationships. But something in him remains restless. Not for her necessarily, but for what she mirrored, the version of himself he tasted only in her presence. A self that felt more vulnerable, more awake, more whole. Has not chasing her, has chasing the feeling, and here is where the shadow begins to whisper again. The very part of him she exposed, the tender, fragile, authentic part, starts to ache in silence. But because he was never taught how to navigate that emotional terrain, he does what he's always done: suppress, avoid, rationalize. Yet the psyche doesn't erase, it repeats. He starts to see glimpses of her in other women. Not her face, but her energy. A laugh, a glance, a certain silence that reminds him. And suddenly, he's not present with the woman in front of him. He's elsewhere, haunted by a symbol. His chasing not love, but resonance. He's looking for a doorway back into himself. Carl Jung warned that what we repress doesn't die, it becomes our destiny. And this is precisely what unfolds. The man who denies his inner experience becomes caught in unconscious repetition. He seeks projects, compares, but nothing satisfies, because what he truly longs for isn't out there. It's inward. The woman he can't forget, she wasn't an event. She was an initiation. But without realizing it, he resists what she triggered. He clings to control. He returns to patterns. And often, this resistance leads to bitterness. He may start to blame her. She confused me. She left without reason. She wasn't clear. Yet deep down, he knows she didn't leave him. She left the illusion. And this is the wound no one sees. Because what hurts most is not the loss of a person, but the realization that we were shown something real and we couldn't hold it. That we were given a glimpse into our soul and we turned away. The masculine ego isn't designed to collapse easily. It's built to endure. But there comes a moment, often in solitude, often at night, when he can no longer pretend. Her presence, even in absence, continues to echo. Not because she was perfect, but because she was authentic. Because in a world of masks, she dared to be real. And that shook him. What follows next is the temptation to go back. Not necessarily to rekindle the relationship, but to retrieve the feeling. He might reach out not from love, but from longing. Longing to feel again. Longing to reclaim the version of himself he lost when she walked away. But this is dangerous ground, because unless he has done the soul's work, he's not reaching for her, he's reaching for comfort. And that is not love. That is avoidance dressed as affection. True love, as Jung understood, is not about possessing another. It's about integration. So what does integration look like? It begins with honesty. The man who has been touched in this way must pause, not chase, not replace, not suppress, but listen. He must ask himself, what was awakened in me? What part of me did she reflect? What am I afraid to face? And in asking, the real transformation begins. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's a quiet dismantling of defenses, a subtle surrender. He begins to sit with the discomfort, the shame, the grief. And strangely, in that darkness, he finds something else, truth. He remembers that she never tried to fix him. She didn't lecture, she didn't demand. She simply was. And it was that being that unraveled him. That's the lesson. She wasn't the answer. She was the question. And now, finally, he's ready to explore it not as a lover chasing a memory, but as a man reclaiming his soul. This is the path of individuation. It doesn't promise resolution. It doesn't guarantee romance, but it offers something deeper wholeness. He begins to relate differently. To others, yes, but mostly to himself. He stops searching for the one who will complete him and starts becoming the one who no longer needs completing. And from that place, he can finally honor her not as the one who got away, but as the one who led him back. Because that's what archetypes do. They don't stay. They awaken. There comes a moment quiet and almost invisible when a man no longer runs. He may still feel lost, uncertain, and bruised by the shadows he once denied, but he is no longer resisting. He is listening. And in that stillness, something ancient begins to move inside him. Not the ache for the woman, but the ache to finally come home to himself. At first, this transformation doesn't feel glorious. It feels disorienting. Because the structures that once held him, the illusions of control, the armor of performance begin to crumble. He starts questioning everything. Who was I before her? Why did I collapse when she saw me? What am I still hiding from myself? This is the doorway to individuation. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of integrating all parts of the self, the shadow, the persona, the unconscious, and the archetypal energies that shape us. For the masculine psyche, this journey is often catalyzed by the symbolic feminine, the Anima not, as an external lover but as an inward call. And now the call is clear. He begins to grieve not just the woman, but his former self. The man who thought strength was silence. The man who believed that feeling deeply was weakness. The man who confused detachment with mastery. That version of him begins to die, and in its place, something new emerges. Something slower, softer, wiser. He no longer chases. He reflects. He no longer blames. He examines. He no longer needs to be seen. He starts seeing himself. The absence of the woman once unbearable becomes meaningful. Not because she wasn't important, but because her departure forced him to confront what he avoided. She did not abandon him, she unveiled him. And in doing so, she fulfilled her archetypal purpose. She was not the destination. She was the catalyst. And now, as he stands in the ruins of his former identity, he begins to rebuild. Not from ambition, not to impress, but from truth. He starts allowing emotions he once exiled. He feels grief without rushing through it. He holds his loneliness like a sacred fire. He listens to his dreams, not just the ones of sleep, but the quiet visions that whisper during waking hours. And in these moments, he doesn't just remember her, he remembers himself in her presence. Not the man who seduced, conquered, or proved, but the man who softened, who trembled, who for the first time didn't perform, and that version of him, the vulnerable one, is the key to everything. Because that man was real. He realizes now that she didn't awaken him through words or actions, but by simply being a living embodiment of what he had denied in himself: presence, authenticity, peace. She didn't ask for anything. She reflected everything. And what he saw terrified him, because he saw his capacity to love, to feel, to be undone. But now he understands to be undone is not to be destroyed. It is to be revealed. He no longer seeks her in others. He no longer projects. He begins to hold space for his inner feminine, not as fantasy, but as symbolic energy. His anima becomes not a woman, but a guide. She shows up in his creativity, in his intuition, in his gentleness with others. She becomes the way he relates to life, not with dominance, but with reverence. And this shift is not loud. It is subtle, like rain softening the earth after a long drought. Eventually he may cross paths with her again, or someone who reflects that same archetypal light. But this time, he meets her differently. He no longer clutches. He no longer fears. Because now he does not need her to feel whole. He is whole. And from this place, love becomes something new. It is no longer about filling voids or escaping loneliness. It is not about roles or rituals. It is about presence. Two whole souls walking side by side, not out of fear, but out of freedom. He now honors her in a sacred way, not because she stayed, but because she left. Because in her departure, she offered him the greatest gift, the invitation to awaken. And for that, he carries gratitude. Not obsession, not nostalgia, just gratitude. Because he knows the truth now, the most profound love is not the one that completes us. It is the one that returns us to ourselves. Time passes. The ache softens, not because he forgets her, but because he has started to remember himself. And this time, the remembering is sacred. It no longer comes from longing. It comes from truth. The man who once ran once collapsed under the weight of an emotion he didn't understand now stands quieter but stronger. Not because he has mastered love, but because he has stopped running from it. In solitude, he's found something extraordinary, not perfection, but presence. He now understands that the woman who once touched his soul wasn't meant to stay forever. She was meant to reveal forever a timeless essence within him that had been asleep. Her role wasn't to rescue, heal, or fix. She came as a mirror, a catalyst, a symbolic encounter scripted by the unconscious. And in honoring her memory, he's not clinging to the past, has integrating the present. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For so long, this man had lived in exile from his feelings, from his tenderness, from his need to be seen. Now he welcomes it. He sees now that what she offered him wasn't certainty. It was reflection. She showed him how deeply he longed to be known, not for his image, but for his essence. And in that gaze, he realized the one who truly needed his love was himself. The journey was never about possession. It was about integration. So now he relates differently. He shows up to relationships with fewer masks. He speaks with more pause. He listens not just to respond, but to feel. He no longer confuses attraction with resonance, nor connection with obligation. He lets things breathe. He no longer seeks intensity to escape emptiness. He seeks depth to embrace wholeness. And when love re-enters his life, as it eventually does, it finds a different man. A man who is no longer trying to be chosen, but who has already chosen himself. He doesn't ask a woman to complete him. He invites her to walk with him side by side on a path neither controls, because he's learned that love is not about needing someone to fill the void. It's about having met your own void and loving from that honest place. And if he meets her again, the woman who once cracked him open, it's no longer with urgency. There's no desperate need for closure or redemption, just clarity. He sees her now for what she truly was, not a missed opportunity, but a sacred threshold, a teacher, a mirror of a forgotten self. And whether she knows it or not, she was the one who turned on the light. And now he walks with that light, not to chase her, but to become who he was meant to be. This is how love matures. It transforms from craving into compassion, from projection into presence, from fear into freedom. And from this new place, the man realizes something quietly profound. The energy he once sought from her now lives inside him. Her grace, her peace, her groundedness. These were not hers alone. They were qualities of his soul reflected in her. And now that he has claimed them, he no longer sees her as the answer. He sees her as a signpost. She didn't arrive to complete him. She arrived to awaken him to his own capacity to be whole. And that realization changes everything. He no longer waits to be chosen. He no longer blames love for hurting him. He no longer asks for love to feel safe. He has made peace with his own depth, and that is the safest place there is. Now when he loves, he doesn't cling. He doesn't control. He offers. And if the woman beside him cannot stay, he doesn't collapse. Because he knows what he carries now cannot be lost. It is his. This is what it means to return to yourself. To no longer see love as something that happens to you, but something that arises from you. Not as a reaction, but as a presence. He is no longer a man seeking to be seen. He is a man who sees, and in that vision, there is no more fear, only reverence. Because love, when stripped of ego and illusion, is not about having someone. It is about becoming someone. And now, dear listener, we arrive at the stillness after the storm. Not because all the answers have been found, but because something within has shifted. Quietly, gently, like the tide pulling you inward. This journey was never truly about another person. Not the woman who stirred your depths. Not the memory that kept returning like a soft echo. It was always, always about you. She came as a symbol, a guide, a mirror held up by the unconscious, so you could see what you were not ready to face, your own soul longing to be remembered. And though she may be gone from your life, her imprint remains not as pain, but as purpose. For in her presence you caught a glimpse of something sacred, a version of yourself, unguarded, tender, alive. You didn't just fall in love with her. You fell in love with who you were when you stood beside her. And now you know that self still exists. It always has. It was never hers to give nor hers to take away. It is yours to claim. This is the beginning, not the end of something precious, the return to your wholeness. Jung taught us that what we deny within, we project outward, and what we repress becomes our fate. But when we bring those hidden parts into the light, when we accept them without shame or fear, they no longer control us. They become our allies, our teachers. So let this be your invitation, not to forget, not to numb, but to integrate, to ask, what did she awaken in me that I was afraid to feel? What part of my soul responded to her silence more than her words? What within me is still waiting to be seen, held, loved, not by another, but by me? Because the truth is, healing does not begin when someone returns. It begins when you return to yourself, to the parts you silenced, to the truths you buried, to the emotions you pushed aside because no one ever taught you how to hold them. And here you are still standing. You didn't break. You cracked open. And through those cracks, the light entered. Let go of the belief that love should feel like certainty. Sometimes love is a brief presence that reshapes you forever. Sometimes the soul doesn't come to stay, it comes to awaken. And sometimes the most powerful relationship you'll ever have is with the person you become after they're gone. So ask yourself, who am I now? Who have I become in the silence that followed her absence? And what parts of me are ready to be reclaimed, not for anyone else, but for my own becoming? If her energy still lingers, let it linger not as longing, but as light. Let her memory be not a wound, but a compass. Let what she symbolized awaken what you now embody. And if this message stirred something in you, if you felt recognized, mirrored, perhaps even comforted, then take a breath and know this. You're not alone in your awakening. There are others walking quietly beside you, feeling the same unspoken transformation. Some of them have met their mirror and let her go. Others are still searching for meaning in the echoes. But all of them are being called inward, just like you. If you feel called to share your story, I invite you to leave a comment below. Your truth may be the mirror someone else is still searching for. Your voice might be the soft permission another soul needs to start healing. And if you found value in this space, if it helped you make sense of your own journey, I encourage you to subscribe and walk with us. Because here, we don't seek to fix you. We seek to reflect you back to yourself. Together, we are not building answers. We are building mirrors, and that is where true healing begins.